It wasn't rage that hit me first when I got fired. It was disbelief, the kind that makes you laugh before you even understand why, the kind that hollows your chest out like someone scooped your lungs with a ladle. I stood in that corner office, staring across the desk at the man who just ended my career with the same tone you'd use to cancel a dinner reservation. He thought it was over. He thought I'd walk out with a box of dusty desk toys and a security escort. But what he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was who I really was. Before we dive in, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. I arrived early. My name's Jake Lawson, 53 years old. Grew up in Ohio, learned the value of hard work from a mechanic dad and a schoolteacher mom. I moved east after college, built a life in systems engineering, built a career that spanned decades. The kind of guy who didn't job hop, didn't play office politics, didn't kiss ass. I stayed late, trained new hires, fixed things quietly without needing a spotlight. For almost 17 years, I was the guy you called when everything else broke. And I loved it. I really did. Even the grind. Even the mornings that started with cold coffee and ended in server room arguments. Because I believed in what we were doing. I believed in loyalty, both ways. So when Connor Rhodes called me into his office that morning, I figured it was about the Q3 infrastructure review. Maybe he wanted insight. Maybe he'd ask for advice. Instead, he gave me a prepared speech he must have rehearsed in the mirror, words like restructuring and alignment with future goals. He didn't look me in the eye when he said it. Effective immediately, your role is being phased out, he told me, like I hadn't given this company more time than I'd given my own family. He thanked me for my contributions, told me HR would be in touch about the exit process, and offered me a half-hearted handshake. I didn't take it. You have no idea what you just did, I said. My voice was calm. Ice-cold calm. He looked confused, like I was supposed to cry or beg or argue. But I didn't do any of that. I walked out of his office with my spine straighter than it had been in years. Because he had no clue what I still had up my sleeve. See, a few years back, after I led a technical overhaul that saved the company from a multi-million-dollar disaster, the executive team offered me a position on the board. Not a flashy one, but official. Voting rights and all. They called it a recognition of service. I never flaunted it, barely mentioned it. And now, that little line on my HR file, the one Connor didn't bother to read, was going to rewrite everything. He fired me, but he had no idea that I could fire back. The moment I stepped out of that office, I didn't head for the elevator. I went straight to my car. Didn't pack my things, didn't say goodbye. Let them box up my stapler and family photo like I was just another file archived and forgotten. I wasn't. And they were going to find that out soon enough. By the time I hit the highway, the adrenaline had settled into a quiet, focused burn. I wasn't the kind of man who shouted or threw things. I was raised on Midwest patience, the kind that waits out a storm and rebuilds after. But make no mistake, I don't forget a slight, and I don't forgive betrayal. Not when it comes from someone who hadn't earned a fraction of what I gave to that place. Connor Rhodes had fired me without realizing he needed my vote in 3 weeks. The board was meeting for the end-of-quarter review. Standard stuff. Budgets, strategy presentations, executive bonuses. And buried deep in that agenda was a line item titled Executive Contract Renewals. His contract. Now, let me be clear. I'm not a vengeful man by nature. I believe in second chances, in people making mistakes. But Connor's mistake wasn't just firing me. It was gutting the senior staff under the guise of efficiency while padding his own budget with performance bonuses tied to artificial savings. He slashed pensions, laid off veterans weeks before retirement, even outsourced our help desk to a call center 2 time zones away, all to make the quarterly numbers shine. And while he was doing that, he was also planning a vacation. I remembered hearing about it in passing, a month-long sabbatical to Italy. Wine, villas, and Wi-Fi turned off. It was all booked. The plane tickets, the reservations. He'd been bragging about it to other execs like he was some startup god who earned it with hustle. But I had something he didn't. Access. I spent the next few days laying low. I didn't respond to HR. Let them wonder if I was nursing wounds or looking for lawyers. I wasn't doing either. I was reading board meeting minutes, reviewing financials, talking to a couple of directors I still had lunch with now and then. Casual chats? Nothing more. Just enough to remind them who I was, what I'd done. And slowly, I started planting the seeds. Funny how many senior engineers we lost this year? Seems like morale's taken a dip, huh? Was there ever a formal vote on that last restructuring round? Connor might have had the job title, but I had the relationships. People remembered who kept the lights on during the data breach in 19, who volunteered weekends without clocking overtime, who trained the interns when managers couldn't be bothered. And those people? Some of them were still in rooms that mattered. By the time the board met, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd just need to raise my hand. 3 weeks can feel like a long time when you're sitting on a secret, and every day I watched the clock like it owed me something. I stayed quiet. No angry social media posts, no lawyer letters. That's what Connor was probably expecting. That's how men like him operate. They wait for noise so they can outmaneuver it. But I wasn't giving him noise. I was giving him silence, the kind that spreads like smoke before a fire. In the meantime, I pulled strings, quietly. I reached out to Cheryl Matthews, one of the more seasoned board members. She'd been around long before Connor and knew what loyalty used to mean in that building. We met for coffee off-site, neutral ground. I told her what happened, how I was dismissed without warning, without consultation. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses, lips pressed tight. "Did he know you're on the board?" she asked. "No," I said, sipping from my cup. "Didn't seem to check the paperwork." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "That's a hell of a blind spot." That meeting turned into 3, then 5. A few calls, a few favors. No deals, no threats, just facts. I laid out the truth. The restructuring hadn't saved money in the long run. Contractor overruns, technical issues, lower client retention. The appearance of profitability was just smoke and mirrors. And behind it all, Connor Rhodes, signing off on every decision while booking a wine tour in Tuscany. See, executives can be selfish. But boards? Boards hate one thing more than incompetence: embarrassment. If the numbers slipped next quarter, shareholders wouldn't be blaming middle management. They'd be asking why the board renewed a CEO contract right before the fall. I didn't have to twist arms. I just had to remind people of their reputations. And it worked. By the time the board met, the room was colder than I'd ever seen it. No banter, no back-patting. Connor walked in all smiles, still clueless, still cocky. He had no idea his ship was already taking on water. When we got to the executive reviews, Cheryl spoke first. Calm, measured. Before we move forward with contract renewals, I think we should revisit the impact of recent leadership decisions, particularly on long-term infrastructure and employee retention. Connor blinked. "Sorry, are we reviewing Q4 now, or?" I didn't say a word, just leaned back in my chair, arms folded. Cheryl didn't look at him. She looked at the other board members. One by one, I watched them nod, shift in their seats, pull up reports. Connor reached for his laptop like it was a shield. It was already too late. The vote didn't even go to second-round discussion. When his contract came up, 7 votes landed in the no column. 3 abstained. 1 yes, his own. He looked stunned, like someone had unplugged his future. I didn't smile, but inside, I unpacked that vacation bag for him. Connor didn't say a word when the final vote was read. His face went pale, then pink. That smooth, practiced smirk he always wore twitched, like it didn't know whether to stay or run. He glanced around the table like someone had just flipped the script and forgot to give him a copy. I wasn't aware there were performance concerns, he said finally, his voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. If I'd been looped in earlier, I could have... Cheryl cut him off. The board has reviewed the full metrics, Connor, including decisions made during the reorganization. This vote reflects more than numbers. It reflects judgment. It was quiet after that. Just the click of her pen as she marked the final notes on the docket. Connor sat there, still frozen in his chair, like he couldn't quite process that the palace guards had turned on him. And I didn't gloat, not then, because men like him, they expect outrage. They prepare for it, but they're never ready for quiet, coordinated consequence. When the meeting adjourned, he stood up slower than usual, still trying to salvage some sense of dignity. So, what happens next? He asked no one in particular. Cheryl gave him a thin, polite smile. There'll be a formal offboarding process. Your transition package will be reviewed and finalized by the end of the quarter. And just like that, the man who fired me with a half-hearted script and a handshake was being shown the same door, with a lot less applause. I waited until most of the room had cleared before I moved. I didn't need to say anything, but I did. As I passed by him, I paused and said quietly, "Hope you bought refundable tickets." He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, like he'd just realized the sniper had been in the room the whole time. "You," he muttered. "You set this up." I shrugged. "You set it up the moment you stopped looking at people and started looking only at profit margins." He opened his mouth, probably to say something clever or cutting, but I was already walking out. That moment wasn't for him. It was for me. It was for every early morning I came in before the lights were even on. For every weekend I worked through lunch while guys like him took 2-hour strategy brunches. For every colleague he tossed aside like used printer paper just to hit a number on a chart. I didn't need him to suffer. I just needed him to remember that people still matter, that loyalty has weight, that good men may be quiet, but we're never powerless. He fired me, and I canceled more than just his vacation. I canceled the illusion that arrogance is invincible. The day after the board meeting, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. No back-to-back meetings, no fire drills, no inbox full of problems only I knew how to fix. Just the soft creak of the house settling and the rustle of trees outside my window. For a long moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. The victory didn't feel like I thought it would. It wasn't fireworks or champagne. It was quieter, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. The weight I'd been carrying for nearly 2 decades, every unspoken frustration, every late night, every "we'll circle back on that," had lifted. But so had the routine that anchored me. I got dressed anyway, not in a suit, just jeans and a worn flannel shirt. Took a drive out to the edge of town where no one knew my name and the coffee was still poured by hand, not on a timer. I sat with a notebook, not because I had anything urgent to plan, but because that's who I was. Always thinking. Always solving. What people like Connor never understood was that not all men in offices dream of power. Some of us just want to build something real, something that works, that lasts. In the weeks that followed, word spread, not in headlines or gossip columns, just in the kind of whispers that travel fast in an industry like ours. Executives noticed. Former colleagues reached out. A few of the ones Connor had let go, good people, quietly shoved out, sent me thank you messages I didn't expect. One of them even asked if I'd consider starting something new. "If you're ever building a team," he wrote, "I want in." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. The truth is I was finally breathing again. And yet part of me kept returning to that moment, the look in Connor's eyes when the board voted him out. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Silence is its own kind of strength. I didn't yell, I didn't sue, I didn't tweet out a tell-all thread. I let my work, my relationships, and my history speak for me. And they did. I spent a few days going through the box HR eventually mailed me. Photos, certificates, old notebooks. At the bottom, I found a small brass plaque I'd never actually hung up. It had been a retirement gift from a junior developer team a few years back. They'd pooled money to have it engraved. "To the guy who never let things fall apart." Funny. That little plate meant more than any title I ever held. Connor had the office, the corner view, the expense account. But I had something better. I had the legacy. Spring came late that year, the kind where you barely notice the season shifting until suddenly the trees are green again, and the air doesn't bite when you breathe. I spent more time on my porch than I had in a decade. Some mornings I didn't check my phone until noon. No unread emails, no missed calls, and strangely, no restlessness. I thought revenge would feel sharper, like a blade you'd have to sheath carefully afterward. But in the end, it felt more like closure. Like boarding up a house you once lived in. Faded wallpaper still on the walls, echoes of old laughter in the corners, but no reason left to stay. I didn't miss the job. I missed what the job used to be before people like Connor turned it into a ladder for their own climb. A few of the directors kept in touch, not out of pity, but respect. Cheryl called once just to tell me how Connor tried to contest the vote, claimed it was politically motivated, said the metrics didn't justify such an extreme reaction. She laughed when she said it, but underneath, I heard the exhaustion in her voice. "Funny how he never once mentioned the people," she said. "Just the numbers." That stuck with me, because long before Connor, we used to talk about people, about teams, culture, mentorship, not just KPIs and margins. Somewhere along the way, the heart of the place got traded for a bigger quarterly bonus, and I let it happen for too long. Quietly, dutifully. Not anymore. One rainy afternoon, I drove out to the old tech college where I used to guest lecture. I asked the dean if they'd be interested in starting a mentorship program. Real-world prep for students about to step into an industry that eats idealism for breakfast. I figured if I couldn't fix what was already broken, maybe I could help shape what comes next. They gave me a classroom and a budget. Not much, but enough. And I started showing up again. Not as Director Lawson, not even as board member. Just Jake, the guy who knew what it meant to be overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. The guy who had been both the hammer and the nail, and learned how to build anyway. The first time a student asked me why I left corporate life, I just said, because I was needed somewhere else. It wasn't a lie. Connor's name hasn't come up since. Last I heard, he tried consulting for a startup on the West Coast. Didn't last. Turns out empty suits don't fit every room. As for me, I don't miss the boardrooms or the titles. What I do miss, what I've reclaimed, is the satisfaction of building something with your own hands, of looking someone in the eye and knowing your word still means something. Connor fired me thinking he erased my value. But I wasn't made by that job. I was just made for more than he could understand.